we've been seeing a lot of 50 Cent handed towards Jim Jones having some issues when it comes to the landlord of this property.
What if one late-night studio pull-up turned into the exact kind of industry chaos nobody can walk back from? Because right now, that is exactly the kind of wild story people online cannot stop talking about. According to the latest wave of chatter, 50 Cent and Jim Jones may have gone from internet trolling and slick captions to a confrontation so explosive that fans are now asking whether this was just rap beef or the night somebody's entire image nearly cracked in front of the culture. And here's the part that has everybody locked in. The whispers are saying Jim didn't just speak on 50 from a distance this time. The story being pushed is that he allegedly showed up where he knew tension was already boiling, thinking it was going to be another loud exchange, another round of ego, another moment for cameras and clout. But if these reports are even halfway true, what happened next may have spiraled way beyond anybody's control. Because people are now claiming there was yelling, shoving, security scrambling, and one sudden moment so intense that those inside the room allegedly froze before they even realized what they had just seen. Some are saying 50 snapped. Others are saying Jim walked into a setup
Jim has kicked the door off the hinges. Jim, I'm with you. What are you saying? You ain't skipped no leg day. This door was just unpenetrable, this first one.
Never saw coming. And now, with talk of leaked studio footage making the rounds, fans are shocked, bloggers are going crazy, and the internet is trying to piece together who really crossed the line first. But this is where it gets messier. Insiders are allegedly hinting this wasn't just about one argument, one insult, or one bad night. No, if the streets are to be believed, this may have been building for weeks behind closed doors. Bruised egos, quiet threats, industry humiliation, and a power play that may have finally exploded when both men ended up too close to back down. And trust me, once you hear who was allegedly inside that studio, what was supposedly said.
Now, 50 also posts the company that says they did put a notice that Jim Jones was evicted. And
before things turned ugly, and why some people think this entire situation could change Jim Jones' standing forever, you're gonna understand why the story has the whole internet holding its breath. First of all, one thing needs to stay very clear. We are only talking about this as commentary based on the kind of reports, whispers, and online stories that have been circulating. None of this is being presented as confirmed fact. But with the way blogs, fan pages, reaction channels, and gossip spaces have been running with this story, people cannot stop asking the same question. What exactly is being said happened inside that studio that night? And why are so many people acting like it nearly changed everything for Jim Jones in one shot? Because the truth is, this kind of drama does not appear out of nowhere. Anyone who has been following the tension between 50 Cent and Jim Jones knows this did not allegedly begin with one random late-night confrontation. According to the Energy Online, this had been building for a while. At first, it looked like the usual rap industry smoke. Slick Instagram captions, indirect shots, sarcasm, petty humiliation, and that familiar "I run this room" energy. But somewhere along the line, the tone allegedly shifted. What people first treated like internet entertainment started feeling a lot more personal. And that is why the reports surrounding that night hit so hard. According to the version that has fans locked in, the mood inside the studio was already strange before Jim even arrived. People allegedly sensed that something was off. The room was active but not relaxed. One producer was supposedly standing with his headphones hanging around his neck, pretending to focus while clearly watching the entrance. The engineer was said to be glancing between the computer screen and the door every few seconds. Even the people sitting on the couch, who had reportedly been joking earlier, were starting to look a lot less comfortable as the night went on. And then there was 50. If the gossip pages are to be believed, he was allegedly moving through the room with the kind of calm that only made the tension worse. Not loud, not aggressive, not pacing, just composed. Too composed. The kind of energy that makes everybody else nervous because it feels like the only person who is not worried is the person who already knows how this night is going to go. Some people even started saying that was the part that made the whole story feel darker. Not the yelling, not the rumors of what happened later, but the idea that 50 allegedly looked way too comfortable in a room where everybody else could feel pressure building. And then, according to the version being passed around online, movement started outside the door. First one person came in, then another, then Jim. And the second he allegedly stepped inside, everything in that room changed. People keep describing it the same way. The studio did not suddenly become loud, it became quiet. The beat that had been playing low
background suddenly felt irrelevant. The little sounds in the room, a chair shifting, somebody's phone vibrating, a bottle touching the table, all started standing out because everybody's attention had moved to one thing. Jim had arrived. And allegedly, the first thing he did was scan the room until his eyes landed directly on 50. So this is where all the jokes are coming from? One version claims he said. Now, whether those were the exact words or not, That line, or some version of it, has been repeated enough online that people are treating it like the opening spark. Because according to multiple versions of the story, this was not some casual pull-up where both men planned to laugh something off and keep it moving. Fans are shocked because the reports are painting it like the room already felt one sentence away from exploding. And what allegedly made things even worse was 50's response. Because according to the rumor-heavy version that has everybody talking, he did not jump up, he did not get loud, he did not rush to match energy. He allegedly stayed exactly where he was, leaned back slightly, looked over, and answered in that same irritatingly cold tone people always associate with him. I say online what I can say in person. And just like that, the air in the room allegedly got heavier. That was the kind of line that doesn't just sound disrespectful, it sounds designed to humiliate. And if that line was really said, then it makes sense why so many people online are framing this whole story as more than just a near fight. Because in rap culture, sometimes the real hit is not physical. Sometimes it is the one sentence that makes the other man feel small in front of a room full of witnesses. And according to the reports, that was the moment when people inside allegedly started shifting in their seats. Someone reportedly muttered, "Nah, chill." Another person allegedly stepped a little closer, like they were already preparing to break something up before it started. But by then, emotions were already running high. According to what is being circulated, Jim moved closer. Some people are saying he was just trying to confront him face to face. Others are saying his posture already looked aggressive. And that difference is exactly why the internet has become obsessed with this story. Because when eyewitness-style accounts start clashing, people don't back away from the drama, they lean in harder. Everybody starts hunting for the real version, convinced that one more leak or one more insider post is about to reveal what actually happened. "You think you can play with me?" one account claims Jim said. And then came the line that allegedly changed the whole temperature of the room. "Only because everybody else lets you," 50 was said to have replied. Now, if that really happened, then no wonder people are saying this was not just tension, it was ego warfare. Because that kind of comeback doesn't just challenge a man, it strips his image in front of witnesses. It turns a confrontation into a test of dominance. And according to the gossip that followed, the room felt that instantly. One person with Jim allegedly spoke up from the side and said, "We didn't come here for all that talking." Which, if true, would explain why people started saying the energy in the room changed from uncomfortable to dangerous. At that point, according to the reports, little details started standing out in a way that made the whole story feel even more real to fans. Somebody allegedly put their phone down. Somebody else reportedly took a step toward the exit. One guy near the back was said to have shifted position, like he already knew this was not ending in a simple argument. And that is why people have been treating this as such a huge moment. Because the version being pushed online is not just two rappers had words. It is two egos walked into the same room after weeks of disrespect, public embarrassment, internet taunting, and bruised pride, and neither one wanted to look weak in front of witnesses. And that is where the studio footage rumor enters the story. Because one of the biggest reasons this narrative has blown up is the possibility, or at least the rumor, that some part of what happened may have been caught on camera. And once people heard that, everything changed. Suddenly it was not just about who said what, it became about who might have proof. Fans started asking whether someone inside had secretly recorded it. Others started speculating about security cameras, hallway footage, or even studio surveillance angles. And the more those rumors spread, the more people started acting like the truth was sitting on somebody's phone, just waiting to leak. But here's what makes this even messier. Even though the exact details keep changing, almost every version floating around online agrees on one thing. The first physical moment allegedly happened fast. Too fast. Some people are saying it started with a shoulder bump. Others are saying someone pushed a hand away. A few are claiming it was chest-to-chest tension that turned into contact. But no matter which version people believe, they all seem to describe the same sudden break in the room's energy. That instant where everything stopped feeling like words and started feeling like something much more serious. A chair reportedly scraped hard across the floor. Someone allegedly shouted, "Yo!" Something metallic was said to have fallen. And according to the way people are talking, that was the second where everybody inside allegedly realized this had crossed a line. Now again, we have to be careful here because none of these dramatic versions are confirmed, but the reports that are making the rounds are all circling around the same claim, that there was one quick reaction in that room that stunned everybody watching. Some are saying Jim lost his balance for a second.
Others are saying he got rocked backward. And some of the more dramatic pages are even pushing the idea that, in that instant, his whole aura took a hit. And honestly, that is why this story is spreading the way it is. Because people expect diss tracks, they expect Instagram captions, they expect podcast shots and slick jokes. But when the rumor starts sounding like one private moment may have publicly shaken somebody's image, the internet treats that like gold. And according to the stories being pushed, the chaos after that first moment was immediate. 2 people allegedly jumped in. One person supposedly grabbed Jim. Another reportedly tried to hold 50 back. Voices got louder, movement got faster, and the words that were allegedly shouted in that room are exactly the kind of words that would make this story impossible to ignore. Say it now. Where's that energy? Do it without the camera. If even half of that was really being yelled, then it would explain why people are framing this as more than just a scuffle. Because this was not just about movement, it was about humiliation. It was about who looked powerful and who looked rattled. And once that kind of story hits the internet, the fans do the rest. One side is already saying Jim was set up, the other side is saying he came in too hot and got checked. And now the culture is doing what it always does, choosing sides before anybody even knows what really happened. But as wild as the alleged confrontation inside that room sounds, people are saying the part that made the story truly dangerous did not happen during the confrontation itself. It happened right after. Because according to the whispers now spreading even faster than the original rumor, there are people claiming this was not just an argument that got out of hand. They are saying the energy in that room felt planned, calculated, like somebody may have already known exactly how that night was supposed to unfold. And that is exactly where this whole story allegedly takes a darker turn. Because once the first wave of shock passed, people online stopped asking only what happened inside the studio, and started asking something much more unsettling. Was Jim Jones walking into a confrontation, or was he walking into a situation that had already been emotionally staged before he even got there? That question alone is what pushed this rumor from simple rap beef into something that felt bigger, nastier, and way more personal. According to the way insiders and fan pages are spinning it, there are now whispers that the studio was not just randomly occupied that night. People are claiming there may have been just enough witnesses in the room to make sure whatever happened would not stay private for long. And if that sounds messy, it is because it is. Because one thing the internet knows about 50 Cent is that he has built an entire public persona around not just winning arguments, but winning narratives. And when fans started connecting that to the leaked footage talk, everything became 10 times more explosive. Because now people are not just saying something happened, they are saying somebody wanted this to become a story, and that changes everything. According to the most dramatic version being pushed around, what allegedly happened after that first physical moment was not just random scrambling. People are saying there was a split-second pause, one of those eerie pauses where everybody in the room realizes at the same time that they are standing inside a moment that might end up all over the internet by morning. One source-style account even claims that, after the room broke into chaos, one person near the back allegedly blurted out, "Yo, stop, they got this on camera." Now nobody knows if that line was really said, but the reason it hit so hard online is because it instantly fed the biggest fear anybody could have in a room like that. Not just that something bad happened, but that it might have been recorded in a way that could destroy somebody's image once the right clips.
Moving. And according to how the story is being told, that possibility may have changed Jim's energy almost immediately. Some gossip pages are claiming that after the first burst of movement, the atmosphere shifted from aggressive to confused. Not calm, not peaceful, just confused. Like suddenly everybody was trying to figure out what had actually just happened, what had been seen, and more importantly, what might leave that room. That is where the emotional conflict allegedly deepened. Because if you look at how this story is spreading, people are not reacting to it like a normal fight rumor, they are reacting to it like a humiliation rumor, and those are always way more dangerous. Because in hip-hop, people can recover from yelling, they can recover from pushing, they can even recover from getting into some ugly late-night mess. What they do not recover from easily is looking weak. And according to the version that has fans obsessed, that is exactly what Jim allegedly realized in the seconds after the confrontation got broken up. Because once people started stepping between them, once hands were up, once the room became less about action and more about damage control, the question allegedly hanging in the air was no longer who won, it was who just looked bad in front of everybody. And if you know anything about public image, you already know why that matters. Because a rapper's power is not just money, it is not just music, it is not just who can get loud online. A lot of it comes down to perception, aura, that feeling that nobody can really embarrass you in front of your peers. And according to the reports now making the rounds, that is the exact thing people are saying may have cracked that night. Some people online are even claiming Jim allegedly started realizing in real time that the room was not moving the way he expected. Instead of people reacting like he had just made some strong statement by pulling up, the energy was supposedly shifting into awkwardness, into whispers, into those little side glances that tell you the room is already building a version of the story without you.
And that may have been the real damage. Because if there's one thing fans keep repeating, it is that this was not just a confrontation, it was an image trap. One fan page described it like this: "He came in trying to make a point, and left as the point." And honestly, that is exactly the kind of line that makes a story like this impossible to kill once it catches traction. Because from there, the reactions allegedly started spreading outside the room almost instantly. One person supposedly texted somebody else. Someone else allegedly sent a voice note. Another person reportedly left the studio and got on the phone before they were even fully outside. And just like that, before anybody had even publicly posted anything, the gossip machine had already started moving. That is why fans are shocked, because this does not sound like one clean incident with one clear explanation. It sounds like the kind of messy, layered, eco-heavy industry moment where 10 people leave the same room and tell 10 different stories, each one shaped to protect their side. And that is exactly what people say started happening. According to one version, Jim was furious because he allegedly felt like he had been baited into giving the internet exactly what it wanted. According to another version, 50 was allegedly so calm afterward that it only made the room more uncomfortable because it created the impression that he was never rattled at all. And that contrast is what has made this whole rumor feel so brutal. Because in stories like this, people always remember who looked emotionally shaken and who looked emotionally untouched. And the more pages kept repeating that contrast, the more the public started running with it. One side began framing it like Jim had been disrespected on purpose until he exploded. The other side started acting like 50 had once again outplayed somebody without ever needing to do too much. And once those two narratives hit the internet at the same time, there was no putting the story back in the box. But what really pushed this into another level was what allegedly happened in the hours after the confrontation. Because according to the blogs, there were already people around both camps trying to get Ann of the story before it got fully out of control. And that is where the so-called cleanup phase allegedly began. Sources are now claiming that calls were being made that same night. Not just angry calls, strategic ones. The kind where people are not only trying to find out what happened, they are trying to find out who knows what happened, who has footage, who is talking, and who needs to stay quiet before sunrise. And if that sounds dramatic, it is because this is exactly the kind of pressure-filled mess that turns a private confrontation into a public industry scandal. Because allegedly, by that point, nobody was
Just worried about the confrontation anymore. They were worried about the story, how it would look, who would get blamed, who would get clowned, who would come out looking dominant, who would come out looking unstable, and maybe most importantly, whether anything existed that could freeze one ugly second of the night forever. Some reports even claim there was panic over phones, not because people were calling the police or anything like that, but because in rooms like this, phones are power. A shaky 10-second clip can rewrite an entire narrative before breakfast. A blurry screenshot can create a whole fake timeline. One muffled voice note can sound like evidence to people who already want to believe the worst. And according to the story spreading online, that is exactly what everybody allegedly understood by the end of that night. This was no longer just about what had happened. It was about what could be made to look like happened. And if you really think about it, that is what makes this rumor so perfect for the internet age. Because half the chaos is not in the event itself. It is in the possibility, the suspense, the idea that there may be one clip, one angle, one witness statement, one leaked detail that could suddenly make everybody choose a side for good. That is why fans keep refreshing pages looking for proof, because they are not just following a story, they are chasing validation for the version they already want to believe. And meanwhile, according to the chatter, people around Jim allegedly started feeling the weight of something even more painful than anger: embarrassment. Because once the story started leaving the studio and entering the phones of people who were not even there, the whole thing allegedly stopped feeling like a private disagreement and started feeling like public damage. And the family was left divided type energy started showing up even among fans and industry watchers. Some people were saying Jim should never have pulled up if he was not ready for the consequences. Others were saying 50 has a habit of psychologically cornering people until they react. Some were calling it a setup. Others were calling it karma. But no matter which side people took, almost everybody agreed on one thing: this was not over. Because according to the rumors now spreading the fastest, the real fallout allegedly didn't begin until somebody close to the situation hinted that what happened in that studio might not be the only thing that came out. Apparently, there are now whispers that the confrontation may have triggered a much uglier chain reaction behind the scenes. Old grudges resurfacing, private conversations getting revisited, and certain people around Jim allegedly beginning to wonder whether standing next to him in this moment might cost them too. And that is where the story gets truly dangerous. Because if the internet only thought this was about one studio incident, it would have burned hot and disappeared. But now, according to what's being said, people are starting to believe this may have cracked open deeper issues that had been buried under pride, loyalty, and performance for a long time. And once that kind of pressure starts leaking into the circle around you, the damage stops being about one night. It starts becoming about who stays loyal when the embarrassment spreads. And according to what people are now saying,
That is exactly when the people around Jim allegedly started showing signs that not everybody was standing as solidly beside him as they were pretending. And that is when the story allegedly stopped being just about 50 and Jim. Because once people started whispering that not everybody around Jim was fully riding for him behind the scenes, the whole situation took on a different kind of danger. Suddenly, this was not just about one late-night confrontation in a studio. Now it was about loyalty, embarrassment, reputation, and the kind of silent fractures that can tear a whole camp apart without anybody needing to throw another punch. According to the reports making the rounds, the hours after that alleged studio blow-up were just as tense as the confrontation itself. Not because people were still physically going at it, but because everybody involved was supposedly trying to figure out who was going to control the story once the sun came up. And that is where things allegedly started getting ugly inside Jim's own circle. Because if there is one thing that the stories trust faster than anything else in the entertainment world, it is the feeling that somebody close to you may have either let you walk into humiliation or is now quietly helping it spread. And right now, that is exactly the kind of rumor that has fans locked in. Some blogs are now claiming that after the confrontation, a few people around Jim allegedly started distancing themselves emotionally almost immediately. Not in some loud, obvious betrayal on camera kind of way. More subtle than that, colder.
Quieter. The kind of shift you only notice if you are already exposed. One person allegedly stopped answering calls as fast. Another reportedly became very careful about what they were willing to say in front of others. And according to one particularly messy version of the story, someone in the extended circle allegedly made a comment that hit way harder than they probably realized. He should have never gone up there that emotional. If that line was really said, then you already know why it would sting. Because that is not just criticism. That is the kind of sentence that makes a man feel like people around him are no longer seeing him as in control. And once that feeling creeps into a situation like this, the damage becomes way bigger than whatever allegedly happened in the room. Because now the question becomes, who is still standing beside you because they believe in you, and who is only standing there because cameras are watching? That is why this rumor has hit such a nerve with fans, because at its core, it is not just about a studio incident. It is about what happens when somebody's image starts slipping in front of the exact people they need to stay solid. And according to the way this whole thing is being framed online, that may be exactly what Jim allegedly started sensing in the aftermath. Because while some people were trying to publicly act like everything was normal, insiders are now claiming the energy behind the scenes was nowhere near normal. There are whispers that some conversations got very tense, that certain people wanted a strong response, that others thought responding emotionally would only make everything worse. And that divide allegedly created even more pressure inside the camp. Because once your people stop agreeing on how to protect you, you are already in trouble. And this is where 50's name allegedly kept hanging over everything like a shadow. Because according to fan pages and reaction channels, one of the most unsettling parts of this whole rumor is that 50 allegedly did not even need to keep doing much after that night. People are saying his silence may have been just as loud as anything he could have posted. Think about it. If a story starts circulating that your rival may have embarrassed you in private, and then that rival does not immediately rush online to scream, brag, or oversell it, that silence can actually make it worse. It creates suspense. It makes people assume there is more. It lets the internet torture you with possibilities. And allegedly, that is exactly what started happening. Fans kept waiting for a post, waiting for a caption, waiting for a blurry screenshot, a sarcastic meme, a studio selfie, anything. Because everybody knows 50's history. People were expecting him to turn a private rumor into a public funeral if he really had the ammo. And according to the way the internet started reacting, the silence itself became part of the story. People began saying things like, if he ain't posted yet, it must be bad. Others started writing, he's waiting for the perfect time. And that kind of talk only made the whole thing feel even more sinister. Because now Jim was not just allegedly dealing with the embarrassment of what might have happened in that room. He was allegedly dealing with the dread of not knowing what could still come out next. And that kind of pressure can mess with anybody, especially when your entire public image depends on never looking shaken. According to one of the more dramatic retellings, people close to Jim allegedly started urging him to get ahead of the narrative before it got completely out of control. Not necessarily by explaining every detail, but by showing strength, by being seen, by reminding the public that he was still him. And that is where the next layer of this story supposedly began, because now the internet is saying that in the days after the alleged studio incident, Jim may have been moving with a very specific kind of energy, not calm, not casual, but determined to prove that whatever was being said about him was not going to define him. That allegedly showed up in how he was seen, who he was around, and the kind of attitude people claimed he was projecting in public. But here's the problem.
When the internet already smells blood, every move starts getting interpreted through the worst possible lens. If you look serious, people say you are rattled. If you laugh, people say you are faking it. If you go quiet, people say you are hiding. If you speak, people say you are trying too hard to save face. And according to the chatter, that is exactly the trap Jim allegedly found himself in. Because no matter what he did, the public had already started building their own emotional storyline around him. And once that happens, facts almost stop mattering. People don't just follow events anymore, they follow vibes. And the vibe the internet had started attaching to Jim was brutal. They were not just asking
whether he got into it with 50. They were asking whether 50 had psychologically broken him, and that is a much harder thing to fight. Because you cannot simply post your way out of a narrative that says your aura cracked. And according to some of the most ruthless fan reactions, that is exactly how people were framing it. They were calling it an ego collapse. They were saying one night undid years of tough talk. They were claiming this was not a fight story, it was a dominance story. And if you know anything about how internet culture works, then you already know why that kind of framing is so dangerous. Because once the memes start, once the sarcastic reactions start, once strangers begin rewriting your identity into a punchline, it becomes almost impossible to stop the bleeding. And allegedly, that is when the emotional stakes around Jim started becoming even more personal. Because now, according to the reports, this was not only affecting how fans were looking at him, it may have been affecting how people around him were looking at him too. And that is where things allegedly started hitting family-level tension. Not necessarily literal blood relatives sitting around a dinner table, but that same emotional feeling, the people closest to you divided, worried, frustrated, and unsure how to help without making it worse. Some people reportedly wanted him to ignore it all and let the storm pass. Others allegedly felt he needed to reclaim the moment aggressively. And that disagreement itself may have become another source of pressure. Because when emotions run high and everybody around you has a different idea of what strength looks like, the person in the middle usually feels even more isolated. And according to the way this story is being told, that isolation may have pushed Jim into a dangerous emotional zone, the kind where pride starts making decisions instead of logic. Which brings us to the twist that has really sent this whole rumor into overdrive. Because now, some people are claiming the alleged studio confrontation may not have been the only thing hanging over Jim after that night. There are whispers, and again, just whispers, that something else may have been floating around behind the scenes. Not just footage, not just witness accounts, something verbal. Something said in that room or immediately after it. Something humiliating enough that if it ever came out clearly, people believe it would hit even harder than the confrontation itself. And this is exactly why the internet has refused to let this story die. Because once a rumor evolves from "there was almost a fight" into "there may be audio, words, or reactions that tell a much uglier story," curiosity goes through the roof. Fans start imagining the worst. They start filling in blanks. They start creating scenes in their own heads that feel more real than anything proven. And that is how stories like this turn into monsters. Because by that point, nobody is just reacting to what was allegedly seen. They are reacting to what they fear might still be heard. And according to the chatter getting louder by the day, there are people who believe exactly that. That the real thing capable of damaging Jim's image forever was not necessarily the movement in that studio, but the one private moment afterward that allegedly revealed how deeply that night may have gotten under his skin. And if that part of the story is even remotely true, then that is exactly why this rumor has stayed alive far longer than a normal industry blow-up ever should. Because once people started suggesting that the real fallout may not have been the alleged confrontation itself, but what was supposedly said and felt afterward, the entire situation took on a much more psychological edge. Suddenly, this was no longer just a "who swung first" type of conversation. Now it was about whether one night may have exposed something much deeper: pride, insecurity, resentment, and the kind of emotional unraveling that can quietly damage a person long after the room clears out. According to the way this story is now being retold across fan pages and reaction channels, the hours and days after that alleged studio night may have been the most revealing part of all. Because while the internet was busy hunting for footage, screenshots, and proof, people around the situation were allegedly reacting to something less visible but much more important: the energy shift. That weird feeling when everybody involved knows something happened, even if nobody wants to say it plainly. And that is where this rumor allegedly turned from gossip into something that felt almost career-threatening. Because what people are now claiming is that Jim did not just walk away from that night with frustration. He allegedly walked away with a much bigger problem: the possibility that too many people had now seen him in a moment he never wanted attached to his name. And once that possibility exists, the damage spreads.
Fast. Because in entertainment, your image does not only live in public, it also lives in private rooms, private conversations, and the opinions of the exact people who help keep your aura alive. If enough people inside the industry start looking at you differently after one bad night, that shift can become more dangerous than any headline. And according to the version now spreading the hardest, that is exactly what may have started happening. People are saying the emotional aftermath around Jim allegedly became heavier by the day. not because he was visibly falling apart in public, but because the pressure of not fully controlling the narrative can wear on anybody, especially when the person on the other side of the story is somebody like 50, somebody with a reputation for turning embarrassment into entertainment and making sure the internet remembers it longer than you want them to. And that is why so many people online are framing this as more than just a rumor about a studio clash. They are treating it like a symbolic moment, the kind of moment where one man allegedly walked in trying to reclaim respect and walked out with the exact opposite energy attached to his name. And if that sounds harsh, it is because the internet has been absolutely brutal with this one. Fans are shocked not just because of what is being claimed happened, but because of how quickly the public started building a bigger meaning around it. They are saying this was about more than tempers, more than ego, more than one ugly exchange. They are saying this may have been the night where years of image building collided with one badly timed emotional reaction. And that is why people keep using words like career, legacy, and aura when they talk about it. Because in this kind of culture, one embarrassing moment does not just stay one embarrassing moment. If the internet likes the story enough, it becomes mythology. And once that happens, the person at the center of it has to fight not just the rumor itself, but the version of themselves the rumor creates. According to the most dramatic interpretations of all this, that may be what made the aftermath so difficult. Because how do you defend yourself against something that is being built more through implication than evidence? If you deny too hard, people think you are scared. If you stay quiet, people think you are hiding. If you joke, people think you are coping. If you get angry, people say the story must have hit a nerve. That is the trap. And allegedly, that is the exact trap this whole situation may have left Jim standing in. Meanwhile, the 50 side of the rumor kept getting colder and more intimidating the longer it stayed vague. Because one of the reasons the story spread so aggressively is that people started projecting a very specific image onto 50 in all of this. Not just as somebody who may have gotten into it with Jim, but as somebody who once again allegedly understood how to let a rival damage himself without needing to over-explain a single thing. That is the part people find chilling. Not just the alleged confrontation, not just the leak rumors, but the possibility that the real victory may have been psychological. And if that is what people believe happened, then it makes sense why this story has felt so sticky. Because the internet always reacts hardest to stories where power does not look loud, it looks controlled. And according to the way this whole thing has been framed, that may be exactly why so many fans walked away feeling like something bigger than a simple argument had played out. They felt like they were watching a reputation get cornered. And that is why the reactions from fans, blogs, and even casual onlookers have stayed so divided. Some people insist Jim was unfairly baited into an emotional situation and then judged for reacting like a human being. Others are convinced that if you walk into a room carrying that much pride and pressure, you better be prepared for whatever comes next. And that split is what has kept this entire topic alive. Because it is not just about what happened, it is about what people believe it says. About masculinity, about ego, about control, about who knows how to weaponize attention and who gets swallowed by it. And honestly, that may be the real reason this story blew up the way it did. Because underneath the gossip, the whispers, the alleged studio drama, and the supposed leaked tension, there is a much more uncomfortable idea sitting at the center of it all. What if one bad night really can shift the way the culture sees you? What if all it takes is one room, one argument, one wrong reaction, and the wrong witnesses for people to start looking at you differently forever? That is the question people can't stop circling back to. Because whether this story is exaggerated, half-true, misunderstood, or totally blown out of proportion by the internet machine, it has already done what the wildest celebrity drama always does.
It made people feel like they were peeking behind the curtain at something private, ugly, and emotionally real. And once the audience gets that feeling, they do not let go easily. So now, all anybody can do is wait and watch. Watch to see if more alleged details come out. Watch to see if any supposed footage ever appears. Watch to see if either side finally says enough to completely change the public's understanding of what really went down. And maybe most importantly, watch to see whether this story fades away like a lot of internet chaos usually does, or whether it keeps growing into one of those industry moments people bring up for years every time those two names are mentioned together. Because if the reports keep getting louder, and if more voices keep hinting that there is still something we have not heard yet, then this may not just stay one night of messy commentary gossip. It could become one of those stories that follows both men far longer than either of them ever expected. And right now, that is exactly why the internet still refuses to look away. And now it all comes down to you. Because after everything that's being said, all the reports, all the reactions, all the different versions floating around, the real question is simple. What do you believe actually happened that night? Was this just another overblown internet story that got twisted for views and drama? Or do you think there's some truth behind these reports that the public still hasn't fully seen yet? Because let's be real, situations like this don't go viral for no reason. Something always sparks it, even if the full picture never comes out. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and the entire situation has left people divided. Some are saying Jim walked into something he underestimated, while others believe he was pushed into reacting and then judged for it. And then there are those who think this might just be another example of how quickly the internet can build a narrative and run with it before anyone can stop it. But what matters most is your take. Do you think this was a setup? Do you think things really got physical like people are claiming? Or do you think this whole situation has been exaggerated way beyond reality? Drop your opinion in the comments right now, because this is one of those stories where every perspective adds something new to the conversation. And if you enjoy content like this, deep dives, industry drama, behind-the-scenes stories that the mainstream doesn't fully break down, then make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because trust me, if anything else comes out about this situation, you're going to want to be here when it does.